Hey everybody, Robert Van Valkenburgh here at Kogan Dojo with Mike Johnson. Thanks for coming out, Mike. Mike is a Pedro Sauer black belt, a career law enforcement officer, and the head instructor at Mike and Jordan Stewart's Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Maryland out in Columbia, and I have him. He's out here for the second time for guest instructor Monday. Sorry, I just got back from a really long drive. I'm a little wound up. Been driving all day. So he's out here for guest instructor Monday. Everybody loved having him out here the last time. My brother Matt started training with Mike. We have a couple other guys here that started training with Mike a long time ago. This is really special to have him come out to the dojo and teach some jiu-jitsu. I want to talk to Mike a little bit about law enforcement, about jiu-jitsu, and how those two things kind of tie together. First of all, how did you get into jiu-jitsu? You did martial arts before jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, so I started training martial arts when I was 15. I started in Tung Soo and I competed all the way up through black belt, and after that I started boxing and kickboxing at the Laurel Boys and Girls Club, and I did that for a while, and I trained a little bit of Bondo at Kingsville Community College, and I ended up catching the first UFC, and watching this little skinny Hoist Gracie go in there and tap out all these guys, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me why these stand-up strikers just didn't knock him out. And so it was very strange for me to see that, and so I went to this wrestling club, this Headhunters Wrestling Club, and there was really no place to train jiu-jitsu at the time, so I started doing some wrestling, and I went in there, and there was this kid who probably weighed about 115 pounds, and I thought, I'm just gonna steamroll this guy, because I was probably about 185 at the time, and he took me down and was all over me like a crazy spider monkey, and there was like nothing I could do, and I was like completely exhausted. It was like nothing I ever felt kickboxing. And so I was like, I gotta learn some stuff here. And then I found another school that was training Shingi Tai Jiu-Jitsu, and so I started training that, and it was a lot of the stand-up was a lot of like judo based, takedowns with the throws, and the groundwork. I guess it was more traditional Japanese style jiu-jitsu type groundwork, because I really didn't see the difference in efficiency until I started training Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So when I went to the police academy in 1998, our primary defensive tactics systems was Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. At the time it was called Grapple. It was Gracie Resisting Attack Procedures for Law Enforcement, and I had that in the academy, and then a couple years after I got out of the academy, I was invited by one of our defensive tactics instructors to come and help start teaching during our in-service training. And so they actually brought Horian Gracie and his son Halleck out here to Maryland to run a certification for that program, and so I did that 40-hour block, and then they sent me out to Torrance a couple years later to recertify, and by then I'd found a school that was teaching jiu-jitsu, and the main instructor was under Higan Machado, Rick Tavares, and so I started training with him, and then eventually I was asked by the school owner to start teaching, and I got hooked up with Pedro Sauer, shortly before then, and have been with Pedro Sauer ever since. And that was kind of my whole journey.
So how did you meet Pedro Sauer?
So Pedro used to come out to Triton Academy in Virginia and do seminars, and so I started hitting all of his seminars every time he came out there. And then my friend Jeff Gordon was under Pedro Sauer at the time, and he had a school out in Montgomery County, and so then I started going and train. Pedro would be there every Tuesday and Thursday, and so I would go at least once a week to train with Pedro. and then from time to time I would travel for his winter or spring camps. I would go up to Virginia once he moved to Virginia, and I started hitting those. So I've kind of been with him ever since.
Cool. And so I mentioned I wanted to talk a little bit about how jiu-jitsu ties into your law enforcement career, and I know you're very passionate about the necessity for jiu-jitsu training or some kind of resistance-based grappling training for all law enforcement officers. So why is that? I mean, why is it so important to you and to all police officers and maybe all first responders?
So you look at what the primary goal of any government use of force is control. And so when you have someone who is resisting arrest, the idea is to get control of them as quickly as possible, so you're less likely to get injured yourself, you're less likely to injure them, and you want to do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. While at the same time, you have to follow these use of force guidelines, that are regulated, by the state and by each police jurisdiction. And what I found is, even though I came up in a striking system, and that was my base foundation in the martial arts, I found that the majority of the incidents that I had as a police officer arresting someone who was resisting, their level of resistance didn't rise to the level of being able to throw punches or kicks. So you basically have passive resistance, which is when you tell someone they're under arrest and they're basically like, no, I'm not going. They're not making any kind of physical movement to resist the arrest. They're just basically standing there, maybe with their arms crossed, their hands in their pockets, saying, no, I'm not going to comply. You can't just start punching and kicking someone at that point to try to get compliance. Then you have active resistance, which at a point is where you go to put hands on them and they start pulling away from you. And active resistance is just their attempt to get away, basically. And at that point, you still can't punch or kick someone or hit someone with your baton outside of some sort of special circumstance. And so, because the majority of arrests that are non-compliant fall into one of these two categories, for the most part, you need a system of control and techniques that are going to allow you to get control of someone who is either passively or actively resisting. And then after that, you have active aggression, whereas someone's then maybe they're trying to punch you or push you or grab you or whatever, and in that situation, then it elevates to where you can throw punches or kicks or use your ass baton and such. And then of course you have the deadly force situation where anything goes at that point. But what I found in my own experience, over 20 years as a police officer, is that the majority of our incidents are either passive resistance or active resistance. And there's just simply no better system to address those situations than Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And they've got the Gracie survival tactics, which is the primary defensive tactics system we use now with my police department. And in 20 years as a police officer, I've never had to punch anyone, I've never had to kick anyone, I've never had to hit anyone with my baton. I've only used my OC spray one time, and that was because it was two girls who were fighting, and there was just nails and hair, and it was just a huge crowd had surrounded me and another officer, and that was the best option at that point. But in every situation, you go to place someone under arrest, and they just don't want to be arrested, and generally they start pulling away and they run. So what do? You chase after them, and then you either push them to the ground or you tackle them to the ground. Well, now you're on the ground, and if you don't know what to do from there, it's like being pushed into a swimming pool and not knowing how to swim. And so I just don't think, based on, and I've part of my training as a law enforcement defensive tactics instructor is they sent me to a Krav Maga force instructor school, and so that's another one of the defensive tactics systems that's widely used by a lot of police jurisdictions. And I just found that many of the techniques and the philosophy of that just wasn't in line with what we see most often as police officers. And in my current position, I review every single use of force that comes through our department, and it's the majority of them are all in that passive resistance, active resistance situation. And so, if you're going to put police officers out there on the street and you want to avoid as much as possible one of these incidents like Baltimore City just had, where this officer got into an altercation with this guy on the street and just starts punching the guy, and he ended up having to resign over it, and it looks terrible for police officers. So why wouldn't you give them the defensive tactics system that best addresses what we do in law enforcement most often? And that's Gracie Jiu-Jitsu all the way.
Thanks. Along with that, something I was thinking about today, anybody who's ever trained with you or rolled with you knows that you are also very physically fit, right?
Yeah.
And that I was thinking about this, that I'm sure that physical fitness and nutrition for you tied directly into the ability that you have to successfully do your job every day. Is that something that you try to stress with candidates?
Absolutely, with the
police
recruits.
officers, with the recruits,
So I've been lifting weights and studying health and fitness since I was in high school, and I've been a certified personal trainer now through NSPA since 2006, 2005, somewhere in there. And at one point in my career, I was the primary defensive tactics instructor and primary fitness coordinator for my police department, and now I oversee the officers that do those positions within my agency. And we've always emphasized with our recruits the importance of maintaining a healthy body, and through both strength training and cardiovascular training and healthy eating, and we've always supported programs that promote these things. As a matter of fact, right now my agency, we do a voluntary PT test every year, and basically the officers come out off duty, they test in push-ups, sit-ups in a minute, vertical jump, and mile-and-a-half run. And for each event they pass, they get $150. So it's a nice way to make $600 in less than 25-30 minutes. And we do that every year, and we've got a program within our agency where we've got certified personal trainers that are available to the officers free of charge. So they can reach out to the fitness coordinator for the department, and he'll set them up with a trainer, and they get a 12-week program with a trainer. It doesn't cost them anything. We also hold, every year we usually do like a health and wellness class, like as an in-service elective that's out there. We have a Facebook page for the officers strictly for that, and from time to time we'll put out like training articles that one of the personal trainers within the department will write or pull up, and that's applicable to police officers. But if you really think about it, the job of a police officer, you go from 0 to 60, like that. So you could just be chilling, driving around in your patrol car, looking for traffic violations, and then all of a sudden you're, chasing someone from a bailout. So you go from sitting for maybe an hour or two, or for some people longer, to up on your feet chasing someone. And of course, it's never just chasing someone on a track that's like straight and narrow. It's through a neighborhood and over a fence, and I've chased people like through ditches and ponds, like little creeks, and backyards, and then you chase people through woods and uphill and downhill, and it's physically demanding. So the job of a police officer can become very physically demanding very quickly. And then what happens when you're done chasing them? You catch them, and then the fight's on. And if you're too winded from the chase, typically what happens is you start to get an overuse of force to compensate for your inability to control this person. In many of the cases where we see excessive use of force, it's oftentimes by officers who are not in good physical condition, or haven't taken their defensive tactics training seriously, and haven't put the amount of time that should be put into it, into honing those techniques. And they're going to have to compensate, and generally when they go to do that, they overcompensate with the amount of force that they use.
Right.
The physical fitness, and just for longevity, I see these guys who spend an entire career in law enforcement. They put in 25, 30 years, and then they retire, and they're in such terrible condition. And I tell them, how could you spend so much time in a career and put away all this money for your retirement? How long do you think you're going to live to collect on that money? So, like, my goal after I retire is to get the most out of that pension system. Like, I put a lot of money into it, and I'm going to make sure I get every penny back and then some. So for me, I want to have that longevity after my career as well. So it's really important. But we have some other programs within our agency. They allow 3 hours a week on duty training time. So, with the supervisor approval, you can go in. We've got gyms at each of our district stations, and, we're allowed to use the fire station gyms and the academy gym. They keep these gyms pretty well equipped. And, it's just a matter, you'd be surprised, like, how many people don't take advantage of that. And they ignore their health. You can make any excuse you want to make, but once you get sick or once you get hurt, none of those excuses are going to matter anymore. All you're going to have is your health, or you're not going to have your health. And so, I take that very seriously.
When we had Hal and Gracie out, Helson's son, when he was leaving, he said, above all else, the one thing that he feels is most neglected in jiu-jitsu is discussion on nutrition and fitness, in above and beyond just training. So it's been something that's been, sort of resonating since he left, and thinking about your job and everything. And I know if people are interested in training with you or in a jiu-jitsu school in Maryland, you're in Columbia.
Yes.
At Mike Stewart and Jordan Stewart School, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Maryland. There's another school in Finksburg, up in Carroll County, and then we're in Anne Arundel County, Severna Park. We also have classes for first responders, scheduled for first responders, at 9 a.m. every day, Monday through Friday, and this is set up by our black belt. Ike Hartel is a firefighter, and it's in between shifts, so people getting off can come in and train after they get off, or people who haven't gone in yet can come in and train before they go in. And I'm not sure, how all the schedules work for all of the different departments, but I know that we have a good, healthy amount of police officers that come train here.
Several officers that work with me, that are training with me. I've got guys who are Secret Service. They're training with me. DEA, U.S. Marshals. It's just not enough people making that investment.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it's an investment that just pays dividends over the course of a career, and can keep you out of trouble in your career, and ensure that you don't wind up one of these people who are being investigated for use of force, or wind up on TV one night with a show of excessive force. You know, at no point, I think, in our history has the profession of law enforcement been so heavily scrutinized by the public as it is now.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody's got a cell phone, and those cell phones come out, and the camera's rolling. And even now, like, you know, the number of police agencies that are having their officers wear body-worn cameras because of this. So I'm telling you guys, if you're police officers out there and you're not training, start. You know, you either come here or whatever school that you can find that's teaching Gracie Jiu-Jitsu near you, and you know, it's not a bunch of people in there trying to hurt anyone. A lot of them have programs specific for law enforcement. They have classes that are like basic classes. If you just never did anything but the basics classes, you would have enough to do your job really well. Yeah. And of course, you know, you get a good sweat going, you get a good workout, it's fun, great people to hang out with, and you know, everybody's there to help each other, so it's a very outgoing and friendly environment. And then the other part of it is just get your time in the gym, or, you know, make some time to get outside and get a run or a bike or something in, and you know, cut back on the booze, and clean up the crap in your diet. You know, you don't have to be 100%. I tell people, look, just 80% effort in eating a clean diet and in training is enough. You know, so, but you know, you got to make that commitment to get it done.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely, buddy.
And I know that that at our school, and I'm sure that at yours as well, that we offer discounts for first responders and for military veterans as well, military and veterans. And I can't say for sure that you guys do. I'm not sure that you deal with that part of it, but I'm sure that if you come in, and especially if you bring a bunch of your friends, that something can be worked out. So if you're in Columbia, if you're in Finksburg, if you're in Severna Park, come check out one of these schools, and that's kogendojo.com or realjujitsu.com. And like Mike said, anywhere that you are, look for a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu school if you're law enforcement, or just EMT, firefighter, whatever. I mean, you guys have to put your hands on people pretty frequently as well who don't necessarily want you to, even if it's in their best interest. And just to keep yourself safe, to keep the other person safe, it's important to be able to know what to do. Like Mike said, you know, when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, it was like I was being handled like I was a child, you know, and this is by blue belts, which is just the second rank. And I was extremely claustrophobic at first, you know, I was freaking out, and that made me want to come back. But a lot of people, you know, it scares them away, and you have to get over that ego and just show up and train. So cool. Mike's about to run a class, and they're finishing up the warm-ups now, but it's always awesome to have you out.
Awesome.
Thank you
buddy.
very much.
Thank you, guys.